Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another week of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host, Jack Greenstock, joined as always by an amazing panel. I'm going to pass it over first this week to Matthew Gates.
Hey everyone, this is Matthew Gates. Most of you know that already though, but yeah, it looks like uh, it is St. Patrick's Day, so I'm sure we'll have some interesting things to talk about for those who are here in the chat. Maybe some pest related stuff, we'll see. Yeah.
Happy to have you back. Happy to be back as well. Next up, we've got the American one.
Hello, Jack and Matthew, and everyone in chat. I am the American one. It's always good to be here on YouTube and the American one underscore with underscore Akeens over on the IG. And yeah, happy Green Patrick's Day, St. Patrick's Day. And yeah, everyone, if you're in Spanibus, I'm sure you're not listening, but I hope everyone's having fun there too.
I believe that we have Brandon Rust and Spartan Grown are at Spanibus this week, and I know a few others probably aren't going to be able to make it based on the St. Patrick's Day or just life in general. But good to be back here with you two to start the show, and I'm always happy to hang out with the amazing panel, plus the great chat that we've got. I'm trying to get them going live over here on my YouTube. But yeah, just there we go. We Nerd DWC checking in first, at least on mine. I gotta go from top chat over to the live chat. But I'm just curious, Matthew, did you recently go to an event? Or is it that you have something coming up? I feel
Yeah,
like
no, that's right. I was at the Living Soil Summit that just transpired in Pahrump.
how'd things go?
It was great. So I was invited there to be a speaker. I was actually invited to be there last year, but they couldn't make it work out. They had a bunch of different things going on, and I guess they went with a more manageable, I think, routine. But this time with like 2 days, but this time they had 3 days. So me and a bunch of other people who they wanted to bring in were brought in. Steve Cantwell is one of the. It was on his land. It was on his place in the Green Life Productions and all Green Life Produce was the farm actually. So we were
So
right
this is
there on
in
the same
Nevada,
land as.
Rumpf.
Hmm?
So it's in Nevada or Nevada.
South Nevada.
Very cool.
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar with the geography, there's mainly like three big cities that you're going to go to if you're going to go to Nevada. The first one is obvious, as Las Vegas. The second one is Reno, and the third one is Pahrump. And Pahrump has been kind of, if there are any Pahrumpites out there, it's I know it's a rather small location, but it's getting larger over time. So a lot of people, as they've egressed from California and some other states, they wound up in Pahrump and some other cities in Nevada. So it's nice. It's very beautiful. It's a lot like those high deserts that I'm very familiar with here in California. So it's right over the mountains, basically, same kind of climate, dry. Hot, certainly. It gets very cold though as well. So there's mountain peaks to your left and to your right. So that kind of traps in everything. So as the sun goes down, it gets cooler quicker.
Good stuff. It's an interesting area. I'm a fan of Southern Nevada. I find it beautiful. I'm not a huge Vegas person as I'm not a giant gambler, but I do like some of the shows and entertainment and things like that. In terms of like, I saw a Penn and Teller magic show there, and they've got some good music and things like that. But yeah, there's lots of stuff going on all over Nevada. Those are the big three for sure. Glad that you got to go out there and spend some time with some good people. I know there's a lot of good stuff going on at the Green is it Green Life Productions, you said? Steve Cantwell is a former UFC fighter, now cannabis grower, and it seems like he's also growing food, fruit and veg and things like that. So pretty awesome stuff.
Yeah, the Living Soil Summit in general is really great. I think that him and his team put on a pretty amazing group. There's about, I want to say, somewhere close to or approaching 300 people, which was nice. There were a lot of different events, different workshops, different people speaking about various topics. And those who bought a ticket, those who went, and those who even just bought a ticket and didn't go, of which I don't think there were very many, they get access to the presentations as well. So they're able to basically access these and also the presentation from previous summits, of which I think there have been two. So this was either the third or the second. I'm actually forgetting, but I think it's the third one. Um, yeah, I met a lot of cool people. I met Chris, Mr. Growit, right? I met Josh and Kelly from Dragonfly Earth Medicine, Dragon Earthfly Medicine. Um, I met uh, Snowtill, Joseph Snow. Brandon was there, which is really cool. And a bunch of other people. And there were some lively debates as well, some panels where I think next year they're looking to do like a little something like a oriented towards like a bit of debate because there were people there who had different opinions about certain things, and they got to present about those topics. I also got to meet Elaine Ingham as well. She was like the guest of honor speaker, and they weren't sure they were going to have her, but they pulled some levers and made it happen. So that was cool. But yeah, and I felt like I did really well myself actually. And I got a lot of good feedback from people who had watched the presentation. So yeah, so if you missed any parts of it, or if you had other workshops that were going on at the same time, you can still go and watch the presentations afterwards. You'll have access um, in permanency. So that was my experience more or less. I think Jack is doing something right now. If the I think he's turned off the video, so I can wax on a little bit more about the Living Soul Summit. Um, my presentation was about this sort of Everswarm concept that I've talked about. I've also talked about writing a book with the same title, and that's related, of course, basically about the theory of IPM and ecological theory that informs it, and the importance of basically something that if you followed this channel, if you followed my content, you're kind of already aware of this, that you should just always be cognizant that things are changing and that Noah the Grower is coming in as well, actually, looks like. Yeah. So people seem to really enjoy that. We talked about certain pests, how they adapt, and not just to chemical controls, but also biocontrols and things like this too. And viruses also played a heavy role in my presentation because since it was the Living Soil Summit, one of the things I touched on was that there are like not just plant viruses, but like insect viruses and things that um, reside in the soil and also get pushed up with precipitation and wind and things like that into the leaves, and then that is how they sometimes infect bugs and things like that. And apparently, it's a lot more common than you think. And so, even the groceries that you buy, maybe people kind of intellectually understand this, but it'd be interesting. It's interesting to see all the different microbes and things that go along and exist that are sometimes hard to quantify, but are definitely happening, and more research is being done about that. So you back?
Sorry, I
Are
had to
you
step
back?
away there for. Yeah, I am back. I had to do a little work with my router and refill my water, but while I left, Noah the Grower joined us. I'm going to pass it back to him and allow him to do his introduction.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Yeah, sorry I'm late. I was while I was waiting to get in, I was just kind of chatting with everybody in the chat there. But yeah, I'm Noah the Grow with two E's. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you back. Matthew was telling us a little bit about the Living Soil Summit there in Pahrump, Nevada. It sounded like it was a good time. Brandon Russ was there as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, and uh it was really cool to see him. The last time I saw him was when he was here in California, so it was pretty nice. It was cool to see all the people intermix. And I guess I do feel like in general people are more or less on the same side. And although there were people who might have had different opinions or different interpretations of research and those sorts of things, I think ultimately there's a good healthy portion of people who were like entrepreneurs in their own right of something like, for example, Brandon, or some of the people who grow cannabis or grow products or create products or services related to that. and people who would, in some way, shape, or form, be using that either individually or because they work at another place where they can implement those sorts of things. So I thought that was really nice because that did give me personally a lot of opportunity to interact with a lot of people of various echelons and get their opinion on various topics. And they had a lot of cool workshops too. Elaine had a workshop. Catalyst Biominimus had a workshop. Dragonfly Earthmist had a workshop or two. But yeah, basically, there are a lot of really relevant things for people who want to cultivate in a living soil or even in a non-living soil environment, to be honest. A lot of that stuff is similar.
Sounds like it was a good time. Any surprises or new things that you hadn't really heard of before, or kind of a lot of kind of it seems like once you get doing this for a while, you see more of the same at a lot of the shows and meetups and things like that. So I'm curious where it kind of fell on that scale for you.
Yeah, and that's also been my experience. Like many other people, I feel as though, and not to make it so mechanical and aromantic, but like it's not a good ROI to go on a conference. Now I drove. I actually had actually my vehicle had an ABS malfunction recently, and it was in a mechanic who I trust quite a bit, who's worked with my family for a while. And unfortunately, he had blown out his back, so it took him a lot longer than it normally would to check it out. But I thought, being the kind of vehicle it is, that I would have to replace the entire ABS because basically, long story short, nobody makes them this way anymore. A vacuum system, I believe it is, or a pneumatic system, a hydra whatever. Anyways, it wasn't that. It got done, and literally the day I received it, I drove like 6 hours to Pahrump, with full confidence that it would be fine, and
Through
it
the
was.
desert. I mean, that
Through
that
the
is
desert, through the
truly
desert.
full
This is
confidence.
very close to Death Valley, by the
For
way.
those who have not done that drive from San Diego or LA to like Southern Nevada, whether it's Vegas or Pahrump, you're going through basically like no man's land for a couple hours and usually pretty high heat, almost regardless of what time you're going throughout the year, unless you do it at nighttime, which in case the desert does get cold, which presents its own sets of challenges and risks out there as well. So not so lots of rest stops or places to pull off and get help and things like that. So it's a definitely a little Wild Westy feeling when you go through there still.
That it is, that it is. But to answer your question more directly, I didn't come across a lot of stuff that was like super wholly unknown to me. But I think that the subjects that were most like that for me would be Bryant, the soil doctor. If you've seen him on social media, he had some really cool takes, I think. And it was also nice to meet him and Jeremy from Build a Soil, and seeing them speak about their spheres that they found interest in. And it is something that I tend to not focus on as much, is like the soil geochemistry and understanding that like that nexus between like plant health, nutrient uptake, and sort of substrate and soil physics, essentially, how those factors interact with each other. So I found that very interesting. But the biggest, coolest thing for me, like I said, was meeting these people, setting dates to collaborate with several of these people, and times and plans like that. And so I did get to get some of that done. So it was really great as soon as like the first day it ended, to be honest. And then I spoke on the second day, and there was a third day. And I think next time they do this, they'll probably still do 2 or 3 days. But like I said, they might be doing like a debate. Like I know a subject that me and Steve agree with, but some other people don't agree with, are like the use of banker plants indoors, for example, or the merits of those. Like, do they work? Are they a good idea? Um, People have heard me talk about biocontrol resistance in pests. I think that's something that could be spoken about more. And also the threat of hop latent viroid. Here's where I'll disagree with Steve a little bit. And I think that what I like about him, for those who've never met Steve before, he's a particularly gregarious individual, and he's very interested in learning information, and he's willing to entertain or consider things that maybe on the surface might seem a little specious. but he's willing to like give it the college try. But he's also not going to just say, "Oh, you're my friend, so of course everything you say I agree with." No, he's going to ask. He likes to ask questions, and he likes to put people, he likes to give people the opportunity to, meet it out and prove why something is a good idea or not, or why something's true or not. And I think he's trying to bring that into the next Living Soul Summit with those debates. And I think that's a good way to go about things because I think he recognized that there were people who had different opinions on things, and the way to talk about that is to have a community forum rather than kind of stay in our spheres and say that anyone who disagrees with us is malicious or incorrect in an egregious way.
I like Steve that he tries out a lot of stuff and he bases his opinions on what he's tried that's worked and hasn't worked, more than
Yeah, results
anything
plus
else. Yeah,
data orientation.
results. Yeah.
He's using, probably a mix of people's techniques and things that he's gathered along the way and tried a handful of things here and there. And I think like we've recommended, like maybe he'll do one bed that way or one plant, like Noah and many others have recommended in the past when you're trying something new. And then if you find out like, wait, maybe that was positive or neutral, maybe I'll do it on a little bit larger scale and then see how it works run after run, side by side versus my current method, and then see ultimately what works the best for you and your environment and cultivation, setup style, experience, and things like that.
Also, Brandon gave me a bunch of his blueberry train wreck. He brought a bunch of stuff, and then he went right to Spanibus. By the way, so like he only had
He's
maybe
wild.
like a few days in Oklahoma or less perhaps, and then not even a breather, and then he went out to Spanibus. So, uh,
He's like the Energizer
so
Bunny, man.
actually a few people did this. Josh and Kelly, I think, also did this as well. So that's a lot. I'm
Gotta
still
respect the
I'm
passion.
still trying to contact everyone and get some plans oriented. So I don't know how people do it.
Certainly, I think everybody's got different tolerances for how much travel and social gathering that they can handle within certain periods of time. I know that I'm certainly excited while I'm there, but as much as I think a lot of people would imagine that I'm more of an extrovert, especially when I'm in those situations, I am a bit chatty. But usually because it's when I'm in a space where there's like a common ground. Like I was just at Hall of Flowers, big cannabis event here in California with my wife, and it's basically a bunch of cannabis brands coming together. And my wife works at a delivery service, so she's there as a purchaser, but she's also working with one of the brands from Northern California to try and get them more exposure down in Southern California. And it's just really cool. A lot of good people. I went last year. I talked about it after last year's show, and I was kind of like a kid in a candy store last year. Growing up in Ohio, it's still kind of crazy to me being in a place where like it's full on legal market for adult use, and you just go to these trade show type conventions, and it's not like a no uh, knock on them, but Canna Business Con or whatever it's called in Las Vegas, like there's not actually any cannabis available. It's like a show where they're showing off like trimming machines and pre-roll packing
That
machines.
hasn't been my experience.
Well, yeah, and I mean,
Are we
from
talking about the same event though? Maybe not.
perhaps, I mean, it might be year to year, and I think that Vegas has changed because they're allowed to. They might have gotten the whatever it's called, the when you can consumption permits or
I
whatever.
think the first ones were like that. You're right. Now that I think about it, so I don't know if you've been to a recent one,
I
perhaps.
haven't been recently. This was like the a few years ago, and a lot of the complaints from my cannabis friends were it was more of a cocaine and alcohol conference
Oh,
than a cannabis
geez.
conference, which was disappointing to
That also
100%
wasn't
of
my
the actual
experience.
stoners. Yeah, so it's
Maybe I wasn't looking
probably
in the right place.
perhaps a different now that they're allowed to actually have open consumption. But I know for a few years it was just more of the getting beside the point, I guess. I'm making an old reference now that I apparently is
Hey, I don't really
dated.
appreciate you disparaging all of my friends like this, trying to cancel me. Are you trying to cancel me, Jack? I don't really appreciate that. No kidding.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
making direct accusations here. You heard it here first. Jack Greenstock calls out Zenthal. That's
that's
the title
right.
of this episode.
Bullets have been fired. No,
Shots fired. But
yeah,
it's
no,
cool
I
wherever it's
I
at
agree with
because
you
I'd
though.
like to
I
go
agree with you.
Vegas. We just got consumption approved in a city here in San Diego that's going to have more events, which they've been doing a lot right with dispensaries and things like that. So I'm excited about that. Um, Potentially going to be doing something in 420 with my wife in Vegas. I'm not sure if we're going to be doing that or not, but it's cool to see that they more and more places are allowing for open consumption so that events can actually happen. So whether it's a live podcast or a show, like the trade show Hall of Flowers we were just at, where you could kind of walk up and down. I don't know how many booths there were, but there was like three or four sort of like event center, like giant, almost like aircraft hangar type things full of booths. And each booth was either somebody, a lot of them were payments, admittedly, like because payments are still a fucking mess in cannabis. But there were a lot of brands, whether it was, sun grown, outdoor, greenhouse, indoor, everything kind of all over the board. And you could just sit and talk with these people and learn about their brand. 80 to 90% of them out, like I may have already mentioned, were the same as last year. And last year I was kind of like kid in the candy store, just like, oh my God, look at all the cannabis. And like you can walk around and they'll either give you stuff for free or you can like scan a little code or they'll give you a little card. And at the end of the show, you can get like a $1 eighth or $3 eighth or something really inexpensive just to kind of get samples. So it's sort of nice to try out a bunch of different stuff because I like to see where I'm at and my buddies are at compared to what's available on the market. And it's interesting, even though I know a lot of the listeners out there are like, this is homegrown. We want to do all homegrown all the time. But it is interesting to see kind of where our product stacks up and what we're able to provide to ourselves versus what the market is able to provide to the consumer. And in this case, the purchasers and things like that.
I'm curious, actually. Maybe we could go, around the panel here, because I think that besides you, Jack, I think, yeah, everyone here is in pretty disparate locations. What is the home grow community situation like? And Jack, you can have your own impression, certainly, but yeah, I'm curious to know for Tao and for Noah, it'd be interesting to contrast those two. Like, for example, in San Diego, I feel, and San Diego County, which is big, I feel like it should be, you would think it would be a lot more put together, but you've probably heard us talk about and lament how it's not. It still isn't. And in a lot of ways, it's still very much kind of like a clandestine thing. Both home growing and also like the events themselves are kind of pop up, a lot of them. There's been pretty significant resistance towards uh, something that's a little bit more appreciable, something a little bit more um, put together, more established. But yeah, that's been my impression. But what do you think, Jack?
I would agree with that. For reference, just because I know we have a lot of listeners all over the world and all over the US, California is huge. We have like almost 40 million or maybe over 40 million people, depending on the year. It's going up and down, but San Diego County has like 3.2 million roughly. And just with that being said, I can drive from like just south of Camp Pendleton, which is like the north point of San Diego County, maybe like 45 minutes or an hour if there's not traffic, and hit like the Mexico border, and maybe like another 30, 40, more like an hour east, and still all be in San Diego County, which maybe that's not big compared to a lot of other counties. Where I'm from in Ohio, it seems like counties aren't not huge, depending on which county you're in, I guess. But yeah, I guess there's a lot of people in a relatively not huge area, but there's pockets like the way that the cities are laid out, and within that you sort of get like I have my groups that are mostly offline. Like the home growers are um, either a lot younger than me or a lot older than me. I feel like few are
I
roughly
agree
around
with
my
that.
age,
That's also been my experience.
and so it's interesting because like there's definitely a lot of really old heads and like OGs that have their own opinions and ways and thoughts on doing things, and I really love and respect all of them. Like I'm humbled to be fucking among them and like have gotten my foot in a few of those doors where I've met some people who made some of the cool strains that I think are awesome. And even like at this event, um, I got to meet Capulator, who's made a big splash on the scene, and talk to him in person, like one on one. And um, I was like, oh, somebody gave me a bag of your Mac One and said it was directly from you. And I always wondered, if this person was being honest or if they're full of it. And I smelled it and it smelled exactly the same. And got a sample, smoked it exactly the same. And No offense to the person, but of all of his stuff, that's like my least favorite strain. I like a lot of his other work, but it's interesting that that's the one that was like kind of his GG4 if he was the Josie Wales of our current time or whatever. But it's interesting to meet somebody in person, get to shake their hand, hold their jars, smell the flower, and yeah, have a good time getting to meet the different people. But going to what you were talking about, is it separated? What's the home grow community like? I'd say that there's certainly pockets of just like a handful of people. A lot of them don't put it online. A lot of people still keep to themselves, even though it's legal. They're worried about like maybe they're not doing it 100% six plants and under. And so, although it's like a slap on the wrist or the fine, they still want to mess around with maybe law enforcement or other people coming around. A lot of people like Noah has shown maybe with his grow will scale back from maybe they were running 8 lights, but now they're running 4. Maybe they're running 100% of the year, all year, every year. Now they take a little bit of time off in the summer, or uh, you know, instead of 6 grows a year, they're doing 4. And instead of 100 connections, they have 20 now, because a lot of people have gone to the legal market for their supply. A lot of people are going to gray market sources, whether they know it or not, where it's like they think it's a legal dispensary, but it's not necessarily permitted by the state of California. It's just somebody who set it up. And they're kind of operating under the old medical model, knowing that there's not much of a penalty that the state can really do other than really what they do is find the landlord, and then the landlord finds the people that are renting from them. And so that's how they try to prevent it, but it's not super effective. They'll sometimes open up in the same shop or even right next door, whatever it is. So I think that's kind of the update on San Diego home grow and commercial opportunities. But I'm curious about Noah the grower and how things are going in his neck of the woods, because he's been there for a while. I know Tao just got to a new area.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've been growing here for about almost 14 years. I think, and actually 14. But the home grow scene is I would echo very similar to your area. It's not as much. There's guys that take breaks in the summer right now. I was actually at a birthday party before I came here. There was a guy I know that grows there, and he was talking about strains, and we talk shop quite a bit because, like you said, there's a lot of people that grow, but they're very hush hush about it because of everything you said. They're going over their pant limits, or they're just they're hardwired that way. But I know that the home grow scene is definitely, it took a huge hit around here personally because I knew all the guys around here in the hydro stores. I knew him personally. I knew the guy that owned the biggest store around here, and he actually passed away. But before that, they were kind of they moved across the bridge to a different place. But and I go to those stores too now, and those stores are kind of going to the hydro store is kind of like my rule of thumb. I can kind of tell by just like looking at their stock of certain things. Like when I walk down shelves, like I'm kind of a nerd like that. I look at dates. I look at things that I can kind of see the dust. Like I've been in these stores so much I can kind of see it. And then like I know that so I know that the home grow scene around here has kind of taken a hit because of the legal market. Um, the guys, they like to get like, different kinds and stuff. But anybody listening to this, I would encourage to grow your own. It's a skill that you're going to want to have eventually. It can help you just it helps you kind of like get into the zone. It's kind of peaceful. There's nothing better than producing something with your own hands. And it's also a lot of fun just to have really, really good pot that is clean. That's another thing, and um, and then sometimes like I'll see people that have like stuff they got from the store and they'll say 32% on it. I'm like, if that's 32%, then what do I got? Because this is way better than that. So it's kind of a pride thing. And anybody who's taking the time to listen to this is probably very into growing as well. And I applaud that. And just stick at it. Anything you do in life, you're going to get better. Like Michael Jordan didn't wake up one day and was Michael Jordan. You get better with practice. You're going to get better. Every grower, you're going to get better. So it's a lot of fun. And but yeah, to to bring it back to the subject, yeah, it's kind of has taken a hit. Like I knew a few guys that grow. They sold their equipment. They kind of but it's usually they run into pests or they run into like guys will just think that they have a good strain and then you commit 4 months to it and it's backlogged in your room, and oh shoot, then you find out, oh, it could be, hop-blind virus. It's just sometimes plants will get to a spot where they kind of plateau. Hey, things happen, and I've just seen so many different things happen around here to other growers that I know. So
It's sort of like a small business. Like there's so many factors that can go
totally.
wrong to put somebody out of business or make it so that they can't operate or won't operate, at least again for a while. Like you just gave a lot of great examples, and the whole percentage thing is so funny because I really don't even care about percentage anymore. Like I've thought I want to get my plants tested just to see kind of what the terpenes were, and I'm just like now realizing there's so much more than terpenes, and even the percentages are, I think, because labs are so uh, unfortunately disincentivized from being perfectly honest, or it's makes a lot of sense for them to like give higher numbers if they can legally. But even within that, like the ones, I think we've only got like a third of our labs left that have permits from the initial drop and things like that. But like now that they're kind of, I think, more honest labs because all these other ones are getting their things yanked for inflating the numbers. You've been seeing a lot less of like the 45% on like non-infused flower here, and it's back to like the 30s and 20s again. And there's a group called CBX. I talk highly of them pretty often. Their stuff usually flies and is pretty decent. And then they have another line that they call Air Bloom, which they're doing like old school strains like Super Silver Haze, Sherbert, um, Cherry Pie, Bubba. The Bubba is like 14%. The Cherry Pie is 16%. I bought the Cherry Pie and it's like one or two hits, you're feeling really good, and like one bowl, and you're like ready for bed. It's so stony. It's like some of the heaviest smoke of any of the stuff I've bought off the legal market ever. And it's like the percentage thing is so overblown, and it's funny because that like almost rings true with like a wine. Like a good wine is usually like 13 to 16%. They're not. It's not like whiskey or grain alcohol like 40%, or in the case of grain alcohol like 190 proof, 95% alcohol. Like not a lot of people are drinking that, but makes good concentrate. But at the same time, it's just like one of the things I did ask a lot of people at the trade show was, what are people shopping based on? What are people buying still to like this day? And people are saying still, what's the highest THC and what's the cheapest? And very, very, very few people even know what terpenes are. Like when I start talking about esters, people are like, no, nope. People don't even know terpenes yet. Like that's way down the road. Like we're not there yet. So they're not even going to take the time to try and educate the market on stuff because terpenes are still like not on the forefront. Rare cannabinoids are little to misunderstood, and it's difficult. I think a lot of people are still it's still early in the market. Crazy enough to believe that because like a lot of us have been doing this for a while in some capacity, growing, medical, rec, adult use, whatever it's called. But I'm curious, Tao, you've recently moved. I don't know if you got to experience any of the previous time in New York when things went legal. It looks like
Yeah,
crazy from what I see online. It looks like the Wild West over there. I'm like,
yeah,
it's like
yeah, yeah.
Oklahoma, like a few months.
As soon as they announced it, even though it wasn't legal to grow, there was people out in Washington Square Park with clones, and there was a couple of gene trader events that happened that I witnessed it myself. People walking down the street with clones walking out of the place, and yeah, the whole New York City smelled. You walk through the city, it just smelled like different weed everywhere you were walking around. But now this year it's legal to grow, so yeah, even the grocery store that I used to go to, they kicked up business big time. They opened up another place while I was still in New York. And now that I'm in Pennsylvania, yeah, I know there's Pennsylvania growers, but they don't, yeah, they can't talk about it too much.
It's like smart poker. You got to mask up still
Yeah,
and hide the identity. He said that people were kind of getting like DUIs over like a fucking roach in the ashtray of their car, like in front of his house. And he's like yelling to him, "Don't say anything. Get an
yeah,
attorney." He's like
shut the fuck up.
trying to help these kids out because like it ruins people's lives, unfortunately. And
Yeah,
I fucking laugh. I was one of them in Ohio. I got my ass beat, and thankfully I was underage, so I just got probation for a year random drug testing. My ass beat by a cop, but if I was a few years older, that could have carried with me my entire life. And it does with a lot of people. We work with the Last Prisoner Project. That's something I was happy to see. There's a group called Evidence that is like $1 from every single product that they sell goes to Last Prisoner Project, and a few other groups there supporting that similar cause because there still are people locked up, usually in state prison, in a
Yeah,
lot of
we
the
need to
red
get the
states.
states all to flip because the federal government ain't going to do it. Well, every time they're just going to hold that carrot until the end of time because every election time they start talking about it to to gather up votes or whatever. Yeah, and it's getting flagrantly blatant that they're not going to ever do anything about it.
Let
Well, it
me
seems like it.
pat
Yeah,
myself on the back for letting all of the federal cannabis prisoners out who have nonviolent cannabis crimes. Oh wait, that's
there
none.
is no. Yeah,
He says like let them out and expunge the record. Just say what it truthfully is. Expunge the records because nobody was in federal prison over nonviolent cannabis crimes. So I'm sure some of those people are very happy that their records got expunged, and that's a huge deal. But at the same time, it's like it is a political chess game where they're like, hey, we're gonna legalize it next cycle. Just make sure you elect us first, and then we'll do it. And then like 4 years, 8 years, however many years later, and it never comes. So it's sad to see on the federal level. Both sides have promised to some extent, and I think, like you're saying, we've got so many states that have it. It's just sad that the few are still holding out, and it can continue to ruin handfuls of, hundreds of thousands of people's lives that, got like a three-strike policy and are life in prison over might have been a single joint or a couple of joints, and
that's why you just got to
mind
be.
blowing.
Don't do stupid things, man.
One thing
You know.
I was reading about, I might have mentioned it earlier, but I feel like certain organizations, like they're losing people. This particularly was about like IT positions and also like technical positions in like the military, where like unfortunately, the like culture of like securities work and like cybersecurity, hey, somebody who's really good at breaking into things, maybe doesn't like worry too much about those kinds of rules potentially. But unfortunately, when you're trying to pool the human resources to fill those positions, you find out that that's the people that you're targeting. And if you're gonna lose out essentially if you make this a big deal. Like certain people, and of course, like people can have their opinion on things like the military and service and that kind of topic. But I think ultimately that's even true for civilian organizations as well, where like it's a boogeyman and now it's like hurting you. Like enough people do it or have done it. There's various polls from many different sources that seem to confirm this. So like making that a stickler point might actually deprive you of really really talented people, and especially at a time like this in a lot of countries where people are hurting and the economy is hurting. uh, Maybe not the smartest move, and perhaps we'll see policy change for that too.
I think it certainly does limit your applicant pool because so many people are using it now, and it's not just like the old kind of, I think now destroyed stereotype, but probably some still hold it, of just like the lazy stoner who's never going to amount to nothing type thing that they tried to make out for so many years that, oh, if you use cannabis, then you're not going to do X, Y, or Z. And there's just countless examples of people who've overcome that and made great lives and families and businesses and changed the world for the better. And I think that it's good to see. I think a lot of people having that stereotype loosen up. A lot of states even lessening the restrictive nature of certain workplaces. Like I think California, you're not allowed to fire people for off work use at this point. I think that at the same time, private employers have long, I think, reserved the right to not hire individuals for any number of reasons. Like not famously, but I've kind of always thought of the Cleveland Clinic as an example where they don't hire anyone who has nicotine in their system. They don't want to hire smokers or people that dip or chew or whatever it is. If you use any tobacco or nicotine, then they'll pass on you in the hiring process. And they're, I guess, within their legal right to do that, even though it's totally legal for people to use nicotine off the clock. It's still going to be in their system and they're going to test. And I guess they worry that people will be smelling like cigarettes or taking smoke breaks or this or that. But that was always sort of like out in the open. Like, hey, if you smoke, you're not going to be able to work at the Cleveland Clinic. So I think within California or any other state, green, red, or purple, indifferent, anywhere in between, there'll be businesses that are going to still, whether it's for religious reasons or moral reasons or whatever other, stigma, stereotype they have against cannabis, they're going to not hire cannabis users. But I think, like you mentioned, almost to their own detriment, especially I know, well, I've heard at least like military recruitment numbers are down, and a lot of other businesses are having hard times filling some of these higher up positions. And it's funny because like a lot of the high paying tech jobs, coding and things like that, a lot of those people don't get drug tested at all. And many of them are open about, oh yeah, I microdose mushrooms and smoke cannabis all the time. And it's like they're, they're, building some of the biggest websites in the world and making platforms like this run. Google has a bunch of them. I'm sure, Zoom and whatever other platforms that we're taking advantage of, Spotify, have tons of cannabis users out there that are going about their daily life and, you know, allowing the day-to-day world of so many to continue. I have met, I mean, I follow 7,500 growers plus through my Instagram account, now probably around 1,000 on Twitter or X. And the one thing I will say is there's a huge percentage of contract people, tradesmen, people that literally like make sure that we have electricity and plumbing and built the roads, trimming the trees, like our EMS, like they span all walks of life. But it's just amazing to see that cannabis users are such a wide span of society. And I think we're personally reliant upon the cannabis community, not just like for one specific thing, but across the board. Like if we all just were like, fuck it, we're gonna protest until we get federal legalization, like true legalization, like grow it like a tomato. Um, it would fuck shit up for a while, but it's so hard to unify any, like even a single, to get our own little group to unify over any one thing would be extremely difficult, let alone all cannabis users countrywide. It'd be, I'd say, darn near impossible. But, groups like Normal and others have made positive strides forward. We've come way further than I ever thought we would have in my lifetime. From, being a teenager, barely able to drive, getting my ass kicked over a pinch of weed and a little spoon pipe, to going to events where you're seeing people that are growing thousands of pounds out in the open, like literally in the field. You could see it while you're driving throughout California, up and down. There's just greenhouses everywhere, and even sun grown, full outdoor, the good stuff, indoor, whatever you want. Uh, it's all legal and available, and it's because people fought, like Dennis Perone and many others, to get laws passed so that we can do what people are doing now. And many would argue that it cuts out the little guy. But I'd say if you look at somebody like Capulator, he's kind of quote unquote like the little guy. He's got like 150 lights, I think he said to me, for a legal operation in California. He somehow made it. He's in a few shops in LA, but he said I think he's trying to push at least 30 pounds a month, which uh, with 150 light grow is enough to keep his operation moving. And it's just cool to get the insight to see somebody who's, a lot of people have talked about it or tried it, and it's tough to actually do, especially in this market. I know it does take a lot of money or luck or good timing or, getting that sort of lottery pick. Sometimes there's like only 5 permits available for your city or county or whatever it is, and you might be the random one that they selected out of a hat. Could be as simple as that. Or when they went through all of the, you know, things that were submitted for the licenses, they're like, oh, this person seems very professional. They turned it in early. They had a good blueprint. They were professional communicators. So although I'm not always the best example, I probably look like a stoner to many with the shaggy beard right now. I definitely need to get trimmed up. But regardless of how you choose to style your hair, I think being a professional, good communicator, uh, doing what you say you're going to do. Like if you say you're going to be somewhere, be there. And if you say you're going to do something, do it. And trying to set that good example for this community, because all it takes is that one time for people to be like, oh, they know you're the fucking grower or smoker or whatever it is, and you show up late, or you're kind of dragging ass, being the lazy one on the work site or whatever it is. Like, I think it keeps those stigmas alive longer than they necessarily should be. So continuing to break those is a positive move. I think that we can all continue to try and do as much as we can in our day-to-day life. But yeah, I'm rambling a little bit over here. I did want to mention one other thing about the whole Hall of Flowers experience. And I know not a lot of people are big fans of these, and I'm not really myself. I'm more of a flower guy. But if you ever have to hit a vape, like a cartridge or whatever, out and about when you're on the road, you'll probably notice sometimes I sneeze after I hit them. My fucking throat gets like a pinch. I'll be coughing often. Uh, you know, it's hard to judge how big of a hit you're getting. But I got to try a different one, and I'm not promoting. I don't even know if they're available yet. But this group out of Canada, I think they're called Quantum Vape, came and they did like a Pepsi challenge where they put a sleeve over two vapes and they had you hit them. And I've hit, thousands of these things at this point. And as soon as I went over the first one I started hitting, I either thought like the battery was off or it's hitting really smooth because I couldn't get that little pinch in the back of my throat that usually get when I'm pulling on one of those vape carts where it's the heat, I really think, about that vapor building up in the back of your throat. And because the way these things are designed, they have a tiny little mouthpiece and you're getting like a little jet of really hot fucking vapor that just is hitting the back of your esophagus or filling up your lungs, whatever it is. Well, this quantum vape or whatever, it looked like a little gold plate with a bunch of holes in it. They had like a big demo set up to explain how they were operating, but they said it comes in like 52% cooler. And I was like, yeah, yeah, but how does it actually work? And in the side by side Pepsi challenge, after I hit the first one, I was like, I almost don't even have to hit the second one. I know that this is the new one. Hit the second one, started fucking coughing up a lung. And they could have potentially, I think that they said that they used the same top, like the same sauce or whatever in each vape. So the same oil went in essentially, but they just went and they were using the what I think is considered an industry standard ceramic coil versus their quantum vape, which looks like a little gold plate with a bunch of holes in it. And I asked them if it was real gold, but they're like, "Oh, that's proprietary. We can't tell you." I'm like, "Is it like nickel hydride or something else?" Like, "Oh, we can't say." So didn't get any information. They seem like nice people out of Canada. They might already be available if you're in Canada, but in California, they're trying to get onto the market. That was their launch event, was this year's Hall of Flowers. So maybe that's something that will come available. And maybe if you hated vapes before because they tore up your throat or just didn't get you high enough, or I mean, I don't know if it's going to fix that problem, to be honest. But if it was because they tear up your throat and are not the most pleasant experience, this might be something that hopefully is a little bit of a solution for that. Because I think the vapes are just convenient when you're out and about, wherever you might be, being a little bit more discreet or just maintaining kind of that buzz as you go. It's nice to have. But I'm curious, do you guys have any thoughts? Do you ever hit the little vape pens, or are you 100% against it? Like, who knows what the fuck is in these things?
It's not really
Yeah,
my
as little as
style.
possible. Generally speaking, not very much.
Yeah, I generally tend to lean more towards if I want a more maintained high, I'd rather go with like RSO. Like that's I could take a little tablet with me, throw it in my pocket, and if I'm feeling like I'm not coming or gonna have my high maintained long enough, I could take that preemptively. They hit usually about an hour and a half, 2 hours in my experience. Some of these micronized edibles have been pretty good in my experience as well, where they say that they're fast acting, and generally I'd say hit within the first hour, sometimes 30 minutes or even earlier in a few experiences with some of the drinks or I think sugar-based edible. Although I don't think they're as potent overall, I think that they might be little bit faster acting. So it's always interesting to see how these different things impact people. Noah, do you have any, or you already mentioned that you're not really a big vape person.
Yeah, I only tried like three or four, but they were from when I was in New York, and it wasn't like dispensary. But I don't trust them things anyway. You don't know what metal they used, or I don't. So yeah,
That's a good point. There was a group called Canna Safe that did a research study where they tested the actual implement, like the ceramic heating element, the battery, the plastics, the glasses, and everything that were used. Got them all to temperature. They tested the oil, got them all to temperature, and then they ran it through the actual device. And like some stuff would actually pass weirdly, like the materials would pass, the product itself would pass, but when you put them together and started heating it up within the actual device, and they like inhaled it through a little fake lung and then tested that, that's when some of them would pop for heavy metals or whatever it was that made it fail. So it's a fascinating process. I know that they're doing a ton of testing here to try and ensure people have the safest products possible. But I know that's definitely not the case in any of the markets that are unregulated. Um, Pre-COVID, kind of, I always wondered, people were talking about vitamin E acetate. People were having a lot of lung issues. I don't know if that just kind of disappeared, but I stopped seeing headlines about that. And maybe people learned, hey, don't use this or don't use it in that volume or that type or something like that. But y'all remember that when people were talking about the vitamin E or other things in vapes that were potentially causing
Yeah,
bad
I
ailments?
do
Yeah, I
remember
remember.
that. And it did just drop off. That was kind of weird.
I wonder, it's always strange how some of that stuff like comes and goes. I feel like I'll see waves of the cannabis hypermesis syndrome, and I think Matthew's actually experienced that personally. So I'm not trying to say that these things aren't real, but they get a lot of media attention, and then I feel like it maybe like anything, there's hype cycles on stuff, and it comes around, and one article gets written in a big, publication, and then that gets basically rewritten by another publication, and the snowball continues to roll down the hill until that 15 seconds of fame or 15 minutes of fame is over. Maybe we'll go around real quick since we're not obviously vape smokers and say what your preferred consumption method is, starting with Matthew.
Talked about it before, but I think joints are probably my favorite. I think that's also true for Dr. Coco as well. And we've mused about why that is, and we even went over some research recently talking about the movement of cannabinoids and other constituents that are found in joints and how they kind of, some of them, the higher molecular weight, molecules, they move kind of slower in kind of a group as it like filters through, almost like water through like a very rocky brook. It's always splashing through the rocks and things like that, so things get caught, as a metaphor. But I also I'm a huge fan of concentrate. I like hash. I like various kinds of hash, and in the umbrella of hash, what you would consider to be or not to be. Um, when I was at the Living Soil Summit, I got to experience a lot of really frosty flower and also some really nice hash holes by Snowtill, for example. And Brandon as well was able to contribute some phenotypes of his Blueberry Trainwreck. And well, I was going to say something like melt. Like I actually got I was given like 10 grams of this suds. They called it suds, and I forget what the parentage is. Do you remember? Have you heard of suds before, Jack?
Not off the top of my head,
No.
I'd have to Google it.
No, I remember there was like a soap related name. So I think that's so the suds
Was it
makes
like soap
sense.
with a Z?
No, but that's actually something that I'm forgetting exactly, but that we did have a conversation. It's not suds with a Z and on purpose. So I think it's not whatever you're thinking of, perhaps.
Yeah, because
Because I
there's a
remember that was
Zope,
a point
like
of
a soap, but spelled with a Z.
yeah, yeah, I think that's why that was
And
brought
Z
up.
is now like Skittles, because Skittles, like Josie got sued for Gorilla Glue by Gorilla Glue. Whoever, I think Wrigley owns Skittles copyrights and trademarks, went after Turpogs, and now Turpogs calls it the Z. They're doing all the Z lines. So I think people are kind of cautious about using the Z at the end of words because they'll be interpreted as being a Skittles or Z cross. Because they were calling it Skittles, but spelling it with like a Z at the beginning and the end and saying taste the strain, bro. Like trying to change it a little bit. But yeah, they definitely didn't didn't win that one.
I also got some rosin recently from a St. Patrick's Day event that happened yesterday. Actually, I only stayed for a small period of time, but if you're in San Diego, you can check out Water of Life Hash. They do some really good stuff, and the Fez is really nice, kind of a fruity, gassy experience, and really clean stuff, as far as I can tell. So yeah, so that's kind of the dichotomy. Like I like joints and flour certainly. And I don't have anything against other methods of consumption for like flour, for example. That's just the one that I tend to lean towards liking a lot, and it's pretty universal. But then there's also various concentrates. But I like the stuff that's not super overly processed in general. You know,
Do you still have your little joint carrier thing that you
yeah, no, it broke because it's not very, it wasn't really made very well, and I wasn't going to spend too much money on a nice one. But I should definitely get another one. I do those 110s though, so it has to be a significant size. Um,
I remember when you
Actually, I
broke
was
that out one
using
time, I was
Falcon
quite
tubes.
impressed. Be Real
But
broke out something similar, so I was like, yeah, damn, Matthew's on that fucking level. He just rolls around with the fucking vest pocket
I
full
used to
of
do it more
big ass
often.
joints.
I brought my nice Zippo lighter.
I
It's
have a
crimson
great deal of
red.
respect for everyone who does that.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. But here's the thing, like, unless you're trying to be a cool guy in an action flick where you're like flicking the Zippo open, lighting it, and then tossing it into an oil bin of some kind for a giant explosion you're going to turn your shoulder towards. It's not that helpful. Certainly the technology for BIC and BIC adjacent lighters, it keeps that fire up, what can I say? But oh, one thing Brandon did was that we shared a couple of cigars together. I don't know the pedigree. Actually no. Were they Cuban or were they were not Cuban, they were from somewhere else.
Non-cannabis cigars, like actual cigars.
Non-cannabis cigars, like actual just cigars. Yeah, so I'll
I would be so
partake
fucked up.
sometimes. Oh
Tobacco gets me
man,
so high, dude. If I
nicotine I'm
accidentally
really
inhale every
resistant to, it
time.
seems like. Um, but that was a nice experience, certainly. It was a good
I'm glad y'all
quality.
had
I'll have to
fun.
ask him.
I do want to
Yeah,
pass it to
yeah.
Tao because he is about to head out at the hour
Oh
mark.
yeah.
But I'll say the reason I actually brought this back up again is because I guess throughout time, I'm like a phases person. Like I'll get it into like my vape phase. I used my vape for a while, and now I'm off of it. I'm back to smoking bongs. But after that whole joint episode, I started smoking a whole bunch of joints again, which I haven't smoked joints in a long time, admittedly. Most of the joints I smoked were back in my high school days. And it's funny, it almost made me feel like high school high again, even though I was smoking the same exact herb. Just the process of like smoking joint after joint. It's like a different effect off of the same product. So, Tal, I'm curious, preferred toking method, and if you have any final thoughts and shout outs before you get rolling.
Yeah, I like smoking it any way that it's presented pretty much, but definitely joints are good. If you have the, you know, time and just like chilling out. But I like my go-to is my little pipe because I, when I was driving to New York, whenever I hit traffic and it came to a full stop, I'd be taking a couple of hits off the pipe because dealing with traffic sucks. And so yeah, I always have the pipe with me, always have weed with me all the time, no matter what. And I also like doing bong rips every once in a while because that's like quick banger. And but yeah, I never really did the carts, and I haven't dabbed a lot either, to be honest. So, but and of course, edible a day is first on the list because that keeps everything going, man. For me, anyway, 100%.
Gonna keep you young forever, aging in
There
reverse.
you
But
go.
I think that I don't think you're missing too much with the carts, but I think that dabs are something I enjoy from time to time. It's not my daily driver by any means, but it's a nice little pick me up here and there, and they're
It seems
definitely
like
very
a lot of work
flavorful.
to get to a hit. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
I must say, the cards are good for like when I would go into concerts with this chick, and she always has a card, and it's always good to have that handy dandy, easy, quick. Doesn't make a cloud of smoke. You don't have to light your lighter and have the security guard look over at you, whatever. So that could help in certain situations for sure. So there's a time and place for all of it. So yeah. But with that, yeah, I'm out here. I'm the American one. You guys know where to find me. It was great hanging out, and we'll catch you around. If not, we'll see you next week. Peace out, everybody.
cheers, Tal. Great having you.
Thanks.
Happy St. Patty's.
Oh yeah, hey, happy St. Patrick's Day, all you Irish motherfuckers. Excuse the French. All right, peace out.
They'll appreciate it. But yeah, it is is today actually St. Patrick's Day, or are people just celebrating today because it's the weekend?
It's St. Patrick's Day.
It's today. It's
I thought so. I
observed
saw.
probably for most people tomorrow. For businesses that are cool, at least.
Let the people have the day off. I think that they're talking about doing that like the day after the Super Bowl, making that Monday a holiday for people, which I'm always for giving people an extra day off.
You're not worried about the breakdown of society?
Tommy Jack over here giving people a break, even though I
Yeah,
work
I
every
agree.
single I work every single holiday. I worked today, and I mean, yeah, it's owning your own business and being a service provider is certainly something that, depending on your rates and hours and things like that, keeps you very busy. So I'm one of
That's
those
for sure.
people that
That's true. And you're
keeps on
always
the move.
constantly thinking about other situations, things to do. Speaking of personal experience. So yeah, I think you're right.
I will say, to make a less stressful the situation of being, not quite an entrepreneur. I've been just service providing the same business for several years and doing a little hobby stuff on the side. But Lady Greenstock has definitely moved up in her life. And so being what some would call dinks or dual income, no kids, um, having her bring in more income just makes things generally a little bit smoother and easier. So always happy to see her excelling in her work. And really, I think she always has been, but she's just getting the acknowledgement, not only verbally and, like the little awards here and there, but she's actually financially getting that recommendation, or not recommendation, but acknowledgement, I guess. And I feel like it's more in line with what she's worth. So I'm happy for her, and just glad to see her succeeding and excelling in her sort of field. So very thankful for Lady G. Been doing some more traveling with her than we have in the past couple years, and she got out of the cannabis space for a little bit and then got back into it, and not just working one job. She's like working with the delivery service, but then she's also working with a few brands on the side. So she's really a hustler and loves cannabis. I call her the weed fairy. She's always giving out cannabis. We're having a potluck tonight for St. Patrick's Day. And in my community, everybody knows she's the cannabis person. So we're bringing cannabis as well as some other foods and things like that. But yeah, it's going to be a good time. We had a little bit of a crazy situation with my community with a few different people here and there that have came and gone. And I think that brought us all way closer together. And the last community event we had was such a great time. So I'm really looking forward to tonight's event. It actually started an hour ago. So shows how much I love all of you. I'm missing out on my community event with my lovely neighborhood peoples that have stuck around and suffered together, but now get to enjoy the beautiful community that we do live in. I'm very grateful to live where I'm at. I love San Diego. I'm from Cleveland, and I think Ohio is beautiful in its own regards. Beautiful metro parks and awesome people. I just saw one of my family friends posted a map with all the states, and it had costs of the average house per state, and Ohio is definitely on the lower end. And they're in real estate, so they're like, "Hey, it's a great time to get a house," and it's affordable here, and it very much so is. For the amount of space that I have here, it's people kind of laugh at how expensive it is because where I'm from, you just get a lot more space for a lot less money, and that's just the reality of the situation. But that said, I enjoy a lot of different elements here: the weather, the cannabis laws, the just it's such a huge state. There's so much going on, but yeah, I'm very happy here and thankful to be here. Thankful for Lady Greenstock and just happy to give her a little bit of a shout out. And a couple of the groups she's working with. One is the American Weed Company, which they're expanding to Nevada. I think they were going to launch 420, but realize I think it's easy to get lost in the shuffle of all the 420 deals, and everybody just wants cheap weed on 420. So I think there might be a little bit of a delay on that. But the other one is Bohemian Chemist, who is more of a boutique craft, sun grown, second generation farmers. They're in Mendocino County, and they have some of the most amazing shit. Like this one they have is called Gazelle. It's got 8% THCV, and 6% THC. So it's like only a 14 percenter. I say only, but then there's like 4% terpenes, and man, it just smells amazing. Great highs, really different, unique stuff. And I'm glad to. I walked around that event, Hall of Flowers, and the reason that we're working with that group is last year when I went, when she was, I hate to say just a buyer, but when she was only working with the delivery service and only working as a buyer, she only had one hat. I'm a buyer for a delivery service. Now she's a buyer and she's working on behalf of a few other brands. And so I had the luxury of walking around kind of on my own for a little bit and honestly evaluating the other brands that are kind of in the same um, metric, I guess, like being sun grown against other sun grown, for lack of a better example. And a lot of the other sun grown examples that we saw just like the year before didn't really stack up with this group, the Bohemian Chemists. That's why we gravitated towards the Bohemian Chemists, and that's why my wife was so adamant about bringing them on her shop, and then becoming like the Southern California salesperson for them. And I'm just it was cool to kind of have it confirmed again, because it's tough to, I guess, a lot of the people being on the Bohemian Chemist booth side of things this year got to see where a lot of people come up and they're like, oh, at that price, I can get indoor, and indoors is better than outdoor. And like then when you like hand a jar to them and let them sniff it, they're like, oh my God, this is way different like than any of the other stuff that we've seen that's outdoor. And like outdoor is almost just a no go for a good amount of people. So it's a hard sell in some markets. LA and San Diego specifically actually are not huge outdoor sun-grown fans. They're very much indoor only, or like mixed light greenhouse, where they want that super frosty, dense, usually purple, but it doesn't have to be purple, but has to usually have a pretty decent nose, good bag appeal. But at the same time, it also has to pack a punch, because they're like, it's funny because having my wife work in the market, we've gotten to smoke a lot of different stuff, and we'll be like, oh, I don't like that. It's not good for us. And usually the stuff that isn't good for us doesn't do well in sales, or like that we don't enjoy. Usually she won't pick it up, but sometimes other people at her business have the decision like, oh yeah, we'll get that. I think it's going to do well. We think it's fine, or it's a good price point. And sometimes it does, but most often I think that like the low quality stuff, even if it's at very low price, I say most people wouldn't buy dog shit even if it's free. So it's the reality is some people will. There's some really low quality stuff out there that does sell, but in San Diego and LA, I guess they're really picky. And yeah, this is definitely going away from the home grow side of things though. So I'm curious, Noah, it's being in the game for about 14 years and working more on like the caregiver side of the craft. Were you ever kind of having to deal with picky markets and people being like, hey, I don't like this, or I want a little bit better trim, or this doesn't have a strong enough nose, or what were some of the things that you had to overcome, and maybe changes you made in terms of feedback working with other people?
Well, I've been involved with cannabis my whole life. So literally from 10th grade, I've been, involved in it. Let's just put it that way. And yeah, so I kind of know what I'm doing a little bit. And I've very similar to you. That's how I judge it. If it's not something I want, that's not something someone else is going to want. It's been very, very, very worked well, very well for me. And so I'm very, very picky. I have been my whole life. I always have been. And so and so is thankfully, so is the guy that showed me everything, my mentor. So it's just kind of gone down the line. It's never really been a struggle for me. But I would say nose appeal is always something that I'm always striving for. Bag appeal, but definitely I mean, there's exceptions to every rule. Like you can find stuff that smells really, really good that has the actual real pungent, like, no mistake smell. But very rarely does something that smells very, very good not have it. I almost think it's probably, to me, more important. The smell is probably more important than bag appeal, because I've seen weed that looked good that was not to fire. But I mean, very, like I said, if out of 100 times, maybe once or twice, if I see weed that smelled just very pungently, like very good, that was not good. So smell is one of the most important things to me. So when I'm curing, I keep that in consideration. So like like right now, I pulled it down on Monday and I'm looking at it right now. I'm going, God, I need to do my laundry because it's in my washer and dryer, so I cannot do laundry. So I'm thinking I'm gonna put it up right now. No, it needs another day or two. So I'm at my parents' house to do laundry, go to laundromat. Like I'm very particular about it. I do not mess around with it at all. And even though it's just for me, but it's just because that's the standard that I've always had. So, and then it's funny the point that you brought up. I might have brought it up before too, but I've only been to jail one day my entire life. I got busted when I was 21 for smoking pot in my job. I was the store manager, or not the store manager. I was the closing manager at a restaurant, and got caught by a cop. Got and it has followed me my whole life. I literally just since 2000, I had surgery in 2016, and since then I've been trying every day to get ready to get a job. And I just applied for this program, which, if anybody's never heard of it, it's a really cool program. It's called the DVR program, Division of Vocational Rehabilitation for Disabled People. And I applied for that, and they do a background check, and they found my weed charge from 2000 and brought it up to me. And I was just like, and weed's legal in my state. And but they're like, it's not really a big deal. We just want to let you know we found that. And it's like, I have just been being lazy. I can go down and get the record sealed. And so now I'm going to do it just because of that. So it does follow you. And I've been turned down from other jobs for that. I've been turned down for rentals because of that, just for a misdemeanor under 40 grams marijuana charge. That's all I got busted for. I had an M&M's container full of weed and a pipe. That's it. And
You wouldn't be
yeah,
able to work in the legal market here over that. Isn't that
yeah,
crazy?
man, it is insane. So yeah, it is crazy, but yeah, like I said, I've done, I've been involved in weed one way or another my whole life. And dude, I'm totally like, bro, I am the pickiest guy you'll ever meet. Like I am super picky. And so like literally like that's why I'm constantly listening like to you guys, and I'm constantly using little tricks. Uh I used to let my water just sit out in jugs, but then Spartan said that he's been filtering his the Berkey water filter. I got a Berkey water filter. I filter all my water, and it's painstaking. I told my other buddy that does it too. He's like, that is so much work. I'm like, yeah, I notice a 1 or 2% different in taste from the chlorine and everything getting taken out. I don't care. I'm doing it. So I'm very particular about every step that I can to make it freaking end better. And it's just done well for me, and I would never quit. And if you told me right now, hey, I just tried this out and it improved the taste of my weed, bring it on. I'll do it tomorrow. So that's just the way that I approach everything when it comes to weed. And yeah, and I encourage people to always strive to get the best they can. And I get it. You can't afford it. You can't do it. But that's the beautiful thing about growing it. Once you figure it out, it's not rocket science. You can grow good weed yourself. Anybody can do it. So it's a very cool thing to be able to do it. Even, a guy like me, just, I haven't been growing that long. I know guys have been growing twice as long as me. So, but I can grow weed. So anybody that, ever wants to try it, to grow better weed, I would encourage it.
Have you tried the late flower drought stress at all?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've tried a lot of different things. I didn't notice a big one in that. I've done the actually the guy that used to own the biggest hydro store around here. He was very adamant about 24 to 48 hours of darkness when he flipped it from whatever 18.6 or 20 to 20 2024. When he flipped it to 12.12, he would just put him in darkness for 24 to 48 hours depending, and then he did it at the very end too. I've tried both of those. It to me, I didn't notice a big difference, but I mean, I think it probably would be setup dependent. It could be strain dependent, and then it's just, I mean, maybe, that's the thing. Plants are really finicky. You know what I mean? Like I've had plants that my buddy gave me, and I'm like, I'll tell you right now. Okay, I hate calling companies out, but dude, I went and bought a very expensive plant from Archive local to here, and it was called, and everybody was talking about, the guy talking about it was called Rainbow Belts, and everybody was talking up, and that plant was horrible in my room, literally the worst strain I've grown in years and years and years. So, and it was like $100 for a clone. So I was like, oh, it's got to be good. Nope, no chance. Gorilla Glue will blow that out of the water. And I mean, and I talked to other guys who told me the exact same thing. Hey, I don't want to go on record, but you're totally right. That was trash. So hey, and listen, and guys are talking about how crazy it's got these unique terps. It's this. It brings out the Skittles. Hey man, to each their own. Didn't work in my room. That's all I can tell you.
I think there's a reason it hasn't stuck around or gotten huge name.
Dude,
You know,
and that's the thing. One of my absolute favorites is duct tape, and that's from Archive. That's GG4 cross with Dosey Dos, and it's one of my absolute all-time favorite strains. So and man, it is literally. I went to somebody's house with it earlier today, and the first thing they were like, "Oh my god, what is that?" I'm like, "Dude, that's the duct tape." So hey, I'm not saying that company doesn't have good stuff. Is far from it. I actually love their Dosey Lotto cut too. Dosey Dos 25 crossed with Gelato 41. I love that strain too. So I mean, that's
Not
sweet
everyone is a home
tasting.
run. That's the way I feel about
Yeah,
Capulator. Like I don't like his Mac One, but I like a lot of his other stuff. And it's just like,
totally.
not everyone is for us, and not every single one is like gonna knock it out of the park. And I just think like, he's definitely more known for the Do and a lot of other stuff like that, and the Dosey crosses and punch crosses and things like that. But it's everybody finds different stuff in some of the phenos too. So it's like maybe they had a little different expression, or like you're saying, even the same cut in a different room brought out more the Z Skittles. I was just reading from Roundtable Selections is supposedly one kind of well held and like not super highly circulated, apparently. And they also say the people that do have it all say it's pretty finicky, kind of like the form cut Girl Scout cookie, where it's like it almost has to be treated just right to express well, and it might not yield great. And at the same time, to get that really Skittles-like flavor that I got the name for, it everything sort of has to be optimal, whatever that everything is. Like it's a sort of unknown concoction at this point. So it's like trying to bake some sort of recipe, but you don't know all the ingredients. And that can be frustrating because what makes your duct tape shine might not bring out the Z terps.
Right.
And what makes the Z terps shine in some dude's greenhouse in Humboldt or, Mendocino County or outdoor somewhere else, it's or even indoor, like here in San Diego. Somebody might just be running it and just killing it with that. But for whatever reason, it's one of those weird things. And I think it's one of the beautiful things that we're still so early into this, that a lot of it's kind of undiscovered and not determined yet. Like there's a group that has the other thing I was asking people was like, where are you most popular? Where do you sell most of your stuff? And one of the groups, Team Elite Genetics, their home base is kind of San Diego. And I was like, oh, that's interesting because like we love their product. And apparently they're having a hard time getting rid of this product called Cuban Links, which is a popular, semi-popular strain. I can't remember if it's I won't guess on who it is because I don't remember right off the top of my head. But it's labeled a sativa and it's definitely more of a sativa hybrid if you look at the buds, but it has a heavy terpenoid nose. And it was one of those like $1 or $3 eighths or whatever. But we also got one they have called Styrofoam Cup, which it like puts me and my wife right to sleep. But like some other people were coming up and they're like, oh, no, I use that during like the daytime. And it's just like always so interesting to see different effects on different people and where different stuff is popular. Because like I guess a lot of sativas, not surprising, are popular around like college campuses. A bunch of kids that want to, smoke and get shit done and go out and party and do other things. And so it's fun getting to know and learn the markets and what different people are after. And it's I think somewhat informative for home growers because a lot of people ultimately end up growing for more than just themselves at some point. Right now, I'm just growing for myself and my wife, but it's always nice to be able to have the option if and when laws and regulations change, or even just gifting stuff, which is usually the way that I like to go about doing things. Is just, hey, try some of this bud that I grew. Tell me what you think. Hopefully you like it. And oftentimes it's like people aren't used to getting free weed, so a lot of people are really just thankful and grateful and happy for that. So it's a fun experience, and I think helps keep forming new bonds and friendships. And like you can hear people maybe in the background. I don't know if you guys can or not, but I can hear it through my headphones. Some of the cheers and things going on in the background. People smoking up and having a good time here on St. Patty's Day. And yeah, it's gonna be a good time. But I'm curious if Matthew has anything new or exciting coming in the ways of IPM to change directions here a little bit.
Sure, I have a topic. I was recently talking to somebody who, well, one thing that I'm working on right now actually is I'm doing a I'm doing a video on. I've got a long form video that's coming out, or maybe we'll chop it into a series about pests forecast, what we know about the various pests that affect cannabis, and perhaps as much where they are, and in places where we don't know where they are. Um, Explicitly, we can make inferences based on other plants they colonize or other research information about them and what their strengths, what are their weaknesses, where might they be hanging around, like in the United States in particular, but also other parts of the world. So that's one thing I'm working on, but that takes a lot of information, and I've been pretty busy lately. The other one is something about trichomes, and in particular silicate or sillified trichomes, and how some plants that have them pretty gruesome. Some of them have these like hooked trichomes. Desmodium clover is one example, where caterpillars, as they're walking across it, they'll get hooked with it, like a fish hook would hook like the cheek or even your skin, for example, if you ever had that invidious situation. But it'll rip and tear their body. And so that could be used as like a trap plant. And so I'm excited about some of these aspects of integrated pest management where it's what we call a constitutive defense. It's a defense that kind of is there, and sure, it can be modulated and like upregulated in the in the presence of damage or wounding of some kind. But generally, I think that defenses like these, like I'm excited for breeders to make use of them more. In cannabis, this is a thing too, as well. So not just for other trap plants that you might use outdoors or indoors, but uh, these sillified trichomes also exist on cannabis, and so I'm excited to talk a little bit about that. And then the first thing I started talking about was there's a lot more machine learning in pest identification, a lot more systems and services that are meant to ID pests in a field and do this visually, and then also give you a bunch of recommendations and foresight or inferences about when the peak might be in your area in your season, and a lot of other historical data and recommendations, which I think is really cool. I was just talking to a fellow who created a trap system like this that actually dispenses the bugs. It'll capture them, take a picture, identify them, send you an email of when and how many and other sorts of information over time. So you don't have to go out and check it, and it even dispenses of the bugs so that it can like refresh itself. Um, and I just think that's really cool. And I think it's a brilliant way to take something very technical and like really like multiply the capability of like an individual or like a very lean team of people. So I think that's in some ways that's when technology I think is very synergistic with farming, and it's not very subtractive. It's very additive. Anyways, what do you guys think of that?
I think that Girthquake, our buddy who was on a couple weeks back, would probably appreciate and enjoy that. He's all about the using plants as part of his IPM, and I think that the first part of what you were talking about would definitely align with his philosophies there as well. And generally, I think that kind of stuff was really cool for IPM. And yeah, it's always good to see new and different technology being used. I've experimented a little bit on my own with the home grow. I've got some little just like plant ID stuff that would try and tell you if your plant was overwatered, underwatered, if there was pest damage, if there was nutrient this or that. And it is really interesting because like as opposed to maybe pulling up you know, a lot of people, it's like the Grow Bible or whatever, they go and pull up some reference sheet of like this is what N toxicity or uh deficiency looks like. And then after you look at that enough times, or maybe you just cut them out and put it right next to your grow so you can look and figure out whatever it is quickly to reference. But ultimately, yeah, you sort of ultimately, I think, learn to memorize what those things are and try and figure out what might be causing the problem. And your usual suspects, like when I was in cocoa, if I didn't water uh, daily, the EC would start to rise. And if I gave full strength nutrients every time, or even a diluted nutrient concentration every time, my EC would get to a place eventually where my plants would have lockout. Although it would look like deficiency, it would hit me with that lockout. And so I think sometimes, even as good as technology can be, I'd get like false readings because it would be like, needs more CalMag, like all the people in the memes. But uh, in reality, it was locked out of CalMag because maybe my pH was off or maybe my EC was way too high. And maybe I wasn't measuring it often enough or at all. And those types of things can get you into trouble because often when I talk to people who are having trouble, a lot less now, thankfully. So many of the growers out there that are listening are no longer newer growers. They've kind of grown into their self as a grower and don't have as many issues. But that being said, it's a constant. I feel like I'm always learning. That's what I used to post when I did post on Instagram. Under every post was hashtag always learning because I do feel that is the truth with anything. If you're open-minded in life, you can kind of always continue to learn and grow. And with technology expanding or just more time spent with anything, the rabbit hole is deep. So you can continue, if you're humble, to try and learn and grow. And like Noah, he's got many years, but like you said, he's got other people who've got double his years, and there's people before them that had double their years. And everybody's collective knowledge, it's like standing on the shoulders of the giants, so to speak. Um, and in the living sense, your own personal experience is maybe an unwritten part of the code, and maybe only you have that. And that's one of the beautiful things is like as cultivators, we're stewards of the plant. We're, I do believe, the few of very many who consume, and so it's a sort of a little bit of a I don't know, responsibility in a way or honor that we get to be the ones to shape and continue forward how the plant looks. Maybe if it's just for us or for people in our little local community around us, or in some cases like making seeds and they're countrywide or worldwide or whatever it is. I see people talking about smoking their Amy Ace's hash in the chat and some people asking about triploid genetics in the chat and things like that. There's just so many different ways to go. But one thing I wanted to mention earlier, I think somebody was talking about lighters, but uh, I held up a Bic in the background, and I do like the Bic lighters, but I will say the one thing that I don't like is they're not refillable. You can see true bong smoker there
I've
putting out the
seen
little.
some refillable ones that are pretty cool, and I think that makes them a lot more sustainable, which is nice.
So that's what I'm getting to, and again, not product placement, but this is this clipper. They're a fairly common brand. It's got like a little bit of a hexagonal shape on the flick spot, and the shape is definitely a little bit different. It's more round on the bottom, but you can refill that with your butane there. But the other thing that I'm not a big fan of with the Bics is they usually come with like a little child safety on the top. I neuter them and pop that off, so it makes it a little bit easier to light, especially if you're like going upside down. For bong smokers, I'm sure you all will understand why that might provide a little bit of convenience. But just a few things that I wanted to throw in there earlier. We were talking about lighters, and maybe it was when you were talking about Zippos, and Zippos are definitely cool. Somebody,
Yeah.
I think it was Seed Person One, or maybe somebody else posted a cool vintage lighter post, and they were like lighters from like the 1900s, and just like really fascinating designs. And actually, one of my buddies had one of the ones that were shown in that example of maybe like 5 or 10 really old school ones. But yeah, it's cool, all the different lighters. The one thing that I haven't seen catch on is the little laser lighters or whatever, like the electric ones that make the little arc, like little X or whatever. I used to have a couple around. They were like marketed as candle lighters or something like that to maybe light your hemp wick or spark a joint with, but never ended up working as well as the good old flame. But I will say, I think a lot of people like the hemp wick in this community for sure.
Yeah, actually, I wrap a little bit of hemp wick around the lighter, because I guess that's the benefit of a Zippo usually is that you have that sustained flame. You don't have to like continue to apply pressure to produce. Watch out, California! It's an automatic lighter, but yeah,
Fully
the number of
semi-automatic.
times. Yeah, exactly. Only use semi-automatic lighters, right? Exactly.
I said fully
Um,
semi-automatic, but either way, yeah, only use semi-automatic lighters.
fully semi-automatic. I'm not
Yeah,
familiar with this lingo.
it's a joke, but sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. No, please go on. No, about how I don't understand your joke. No. Um, yeah, I think that like some techno speaking of weapons, some technologies like they get to a point where they're pretty much like at their like platonic ideal, and I feel like some guns are like that. And also feel like we've done pretty good with lighter technology there. Unfortunately, like they're made out of plastic, and there's probably other things and components that we can make them a little bit more sustainable with. But generally speaking, I think we've really made a like it's hard. You have that engineering problem of once you've made something really effective and efficient, you know, it's kind of a developmental dead end. So sometimes that can be a problem, right? And it makes people create solutions to problems that aren't there to begin with. So you got to be careful with that, I
And
guess.
sometimes the sustainable solutions end up not being sustainable because the energy that it takes to, like, let's say, grow the hemp or whatever alternative plastic you use, or glass as an alternative. If you have to heat the glass to make it and form it, there's energy and things that go into that. So sustainability is definitely a tricky one. The one thing I'll say, I'll set my mic down to do this, but the clippers have this little removable thing as well. So if your flint little flick here goes out, this is you just pull it up, and then so although there's a little bit of plastic in that, this body is essentially infinitely reusable until one of your buddies steals it from you, which is ultimately how most of
I
my lighters
like that.
end up going, if they come, if people are coming and going. But I have had a lot of the Bics throughout the day because they're not refillable. We would get little 5 packs with fun colors and designs that say silly things, or have like Bob Marley on them, or tie-dye colors, or just cool different random colors and shit. Um, that's a good way to not have your lighter stolen. And ultimately, even if you do have a different color lighter, like at the Tommy Chong event, I met a person, I think they go by Can of Blind Guy, or that's what they used to go by. They're actually blind. So we were smoking. I didn't take offense to it when they let me know that they found out when they got back from the event. They accidentally stole one of my lighters. And I think they had some sort of way. I don't know if um, blindness is a spectrum, I guess. Not spectrum, but some people are,
No, it is for sure.
uh,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
you know, it's some people can see a little bit, but they're still legally blind. And so I think that this person is able to either identify color, or they have a device that identifies color. So they realize that like they had a powder blue lighter, and I happen to like have this powder blue lighter, and we were talking about it while we were smoking. So they, it was just a wild event. And I didn't hold any ill will or anything. It was just, we've kept in touch, and this person's a great person, but it's funny how easily, somebody could have a lighter slip off with them. And as much as the color might stand out in that case, didn't matter. And even I think if the color, it could have been bright orange or neon pink or something like that. And still, once it goes in somebody's pocket, because like a lot of people will, like Tao was talking about earlier, like they'll hit a bowl and then they'll just by force of habit put the lighter into their pocket, because it's just like a good place to put it, so that they're not walking around just holding a lighter. The other thing, like you were saying, lighters, as far as like the access to fire, like being a resource to human beings, like most of us aren't in the survival space anymore. But having one of these, if you are out in the middle of the woods trying to live, is way easier than, starting a fire the traditional ways. So they're still like, just for the size that it takes up in a pack, and the weight, the amount of times that you can light this over and over, it's,
It's magical.
they're
Yeah,
it's really like cavemen would kill for this tool. Like, this is like the creme de la creme of like instant fire on demand. And like, yeah, we've got windproof ones as well. So it's certainly a fascinating technology that has, I think, somewhat closely evolved along with humans and smokers and non-lighter related. One of the cool things that that group, Bohemian Chemists, the sun-grown group out of Mendocino, they've got custom protopipes that are coming out in April. The old school, like I think they came out in the 50s or 60s. They're like all brass, and the pipe has like a little pipe cover and a little poker that pops out, and a little tar catch in the bottom. But they're really, it's like engineered by machinists, and they're made in a machine shop, and It was a throwback. One of my buddies had them when I was younger, growing up smoking, and it kind of is a flashback. I guess brass is a good metal for a number of reasons. I don't think it's a heavy metal, so I think it's fine to smoke out of, and um, it doesn't get hot super quickly, so you can definitely smoke your whole bowl, and it doesn't heat up. The other thing is like, unlike a lot of glass pipes that I've dropped and broken in the past, it's something that you can kind of have on the go and not worry about breaking. And I know a lot of tradespeople throw them in a toolbox, and it's like they have a bowl or half a bowl at lunch, and then like right when they get off, they got another bowl waiting in there for them, and it can bang around, and they don't have to worry about it breaking. So it's easy to clean too, being all brass. It's you can just soak it in alcohol and basically clean it up. So, but yeah, tangent aside, I saw Matthew unmuting there for a minute, and I want to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I recommend that people keep multiple ways to make fire, like in their car. And some people who live in places with actual seasons, unlike myself and yourself, up until recently at least, yeah, like I think people do this more often. Like, keep water in your car, your truck. Keep a way to make fire. Keep two, maybe, or three ways to make fire or have resources for sure. So.
Very, very under rated tip there. I for sure think always traveling with water and uh, good little ways to survive, because as much as our cars and things are reliable, like I was talking about earlier, when you're going to Vegas, if you break down in the middle of the desert, it's nice to have a few gallons of water on you until you get in communication with somebody or get your car back up and running. And welcome in to Dr. MJ Coco. We'll just pretend like it's the beginning of the show. Welcome, Doc.
Hey, yeah, I'm right on time, right? This is when the show starts.
I think so.
Sorry about being late, guys. I'm like, should I even bother? I'm like, yeah, I missed last week, so I should get on there and at least say hello. So I'm Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. Just joining you from playing softball. So that's where I was. You guys having fun on St. Patrick's Day?
We are just kind of random chat, hanging out. We had TAO with us for the first hour. He jumped out. We've kind of went around the horn, kind of a bunch of different topics, but it sounds like softball, I should say, looks like it went well. You didn't come home injured or overly dirty or sweaty, so it worked out.
Yeah, it was fun. Really casual game, and yeah, it was fun. I enjoy it. That's why
Holiday games.
that's what I'm struggling with. That's where I was last week too. And I'm like, damn, am I gonna keep playing softball with these people, or am I gonna like keep doing my show? Because I miss you guys. I like being here.
It's fun. I've definitely been part of a league, and it's a good way to stay a little bit active. It's not like you're saying, a lot of them are kind of laid back and more of a camaraderie, just coming together and great groups of people. And I think that that's one of the good things in life, whatever it is, bringing people together. I think there's a lot of studies that show it makes people live longer, and even like small amounts of drinking have been overcome by the benefit of people like having a social buddy, even if they're like hanging out, and if they just had like truly like one or two drinks every now and then, and it made them hang out. They're checking in on each other. It's almost like another person that actually cares about them and values their life, and so they end up, say, hey, you should maybe get that checked out at the doctor, or whatever it is. Like they make you do the stuff that you probably don't want to do, and keep you honest. And it's good to have people in your life that will keep you in check at any age, whether it's a significant other or just a friend, or it could be a coworker, whatever it is. It's always good to have support groups and networks of people to be there for you. And I think cannabis is a wonderful provider of that.
We're doing
Talked
here
about that
too,
earlier.
right? We've got a community here, and we give each other support, camaraderie, and yeah, it's different when you can actually like run around on the grass with people and throw a ball around, but it still counts. This connects us to people much farther away that we'd otherwise probably lose touch with. I see a lot of good friends out there shouting me out in chat. So shout out to everybody out there. Yeah, it's tough to balance all the different communities sometimes.
Certainly can be. I'm thankful that I'm able to make it as much as I have been. I just sort of treat this like uh part of my work schedule at this point. I'm like 4 to 6 this is my job for the week. And unless I have the rare event where I'm traveling personal stuff with my wife or going to do whatever else, I tend to be here, which is it's nice. It's good to have something that's not part of my day. I generally work 7 days a week, so it's good to have a little bit of a guaranteed,
Yeah,
like, oh, I'm
scheduled
not
down.
gonna add another client here. And it's just
Right.
like it's a difference. It's more mentally, I guess not straining, but like it's more. I feel like it being focused on a conversation for a few hours. That's like sometimes high level sciences and stuff like that. Is so different than like my work, which is mostly very physical, doing like hiking, biking, tennis, swimming, and things like that. So it's a nice change of pace,
Yeah.
and it's always good to have a diversity of things in our lives. I think it's easy to get caught up in just loving one thing or another. I'm a person who gets all the way into the deep end and really fall in love with whatever hobby I'm into at the time. But it's always nice to have things to change it up and groups of people that have different life experiences and ways of coming at even the same thing. Like here, we all grow differently and all have a different sort of place in the community. Like
Yeah.
we got to give Matthew a little bit of the IPM spotlight there for a bit because it was just myself and Noah. And so I always love to see where Matthew's at and all the updates because it's honestly, there's 100 ways that it can go with IPM. So I know if I'm like, oh, we don't have something to talk about, I can pass it to Matthew, and I'm sure he has something new or interesting because there is always something new and interesting. And I know he's one of those people who's keeping up with it, and I'm very grateful to have him and yourself and Noah and many others who are so passionate about this plant that we're willing to show up weekly and talk about it and figure out different things and flow through sometimes a planned topic or sometimes today it's just like St. Patrick's Day. We're just having fun, hanging out, talking a little bit of grow or culture. I think we're kind of, I like that we don't have a strict regiment to it because uh, I think that's what allows us to keep flowing. Because if we had to crank out the same type of show over and over and over again, we'd certainly get burnt out or run out of types of things to talk about that bring a little bit of our personal lives into it. Talking about like, well, in this case, we don't even have to really talk about it. They're just not here. Brandon and um, Spartan Grown being at Spanibus. They'll get to come back, and I'm sure in the next week's episode or week after that, you're going to get to hear about their travels. And Brandon will give his update on, like Matthew just gave his update earlier on the Living Soil Summit that just happened in Nevada. So there's a lot to talk about with our lives because we're all actually doing the stuff, and living and working within the space. And so it's kind of fun, I think, for the people out there to get little updates, even if it's not 100% grow. A lot of it's cannabis culture and life related because, many of us are making it part of, or if not our full-time thing at this point. So it's really fun to see that these opportunities exist and we're able to talk about them. And there are still people in the red states. So it can also give people insight onto how to be in on that ground floor when it becomes legal in your state. Like, what level do you want to be at? Do you want to be a cultivator? Do you want to be a distributor? Do you want to be a salesperson? Do you want to work? There's so many places you don't have to know the plant. Most people don't, even in the space. Most people that work in the cannabis industry don't really know a lot about the plant. They're mostly salespeople. The people, what they know about it is the user perspective, how it affects them, what it smells like, what it tastes like, what the smoker or end user is going to want to know. But most people don't know the difference between veg and flower. They just think it's always like, oh, you just pop the seed and eventually you get cannabis, right? It's a weed. It should be easy to grow. And that's like the level of until you actually grow it, education that most people have on growing cannabis or most any plant until you have the real life experience of being humbled by a few rough harvests or a bad grow season if you're outdoor or something like that. So always some variables to keep up with.
Yeah, for
Anything you've got a few different grow challenges and things like that going on, Doc. Have you had any newer exciting things going on with, like, I know you did like the smallest auto or smallest pot and things like that. Did you have any fun ones yourself or see anything cool on your community over there?
We're in the middle of judging the cloning contest we did in the NYGC. Yeah. Um, so we're selecting the winners of the smallest rooted clone and the largest rooted clone and the fastest rooted clone. And I think we're gonna meet and discuss that just in a couple of days and announce it soon. So that should be fun. I had a clone that successfully rooted. It was pretty small. But then I didn't have anything to do with it, so it eventually died. But my actual NYGC plants are doing pretty well. I guess the exciting thing, I'm working with a new client that's setting up a pretty large greenhouse grow with supplemental lighting. So I'm doing helping them do their cultivation plan and set of SOPs, teaching them all those things that they may not know about. Sort of, there's a veg and there's a flower. But it's the first client that I've worked with like this in a greenhouse. So some new interesting things are coming up that we're having to sort of work through.
Do you find that when you create an SOP, most of the groups that you're working with are able to diligently follow it, or is it still difficult for them to find staff and implement it on a scale that like you'd be happy to say like, oh, it's like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10? Like, are you retraining or training, having to any difficulties with getting people to implement kind of the SOP that you're putting out?
That's a good question. It sounds like somebody that's done this before because yeah, you try to like, lead some people by the hand and be like, okay, do this and then like you call back a few weeks later and they're like excited to tell you how they're doing something radically different than everything you tried to teach them. And yeah, I'm like, okay, like that's not what we talked about. So that definitely happens. I'm not far enough along with this particular client. So far, it seems pretty good. But yeah, I'm trying to do, pretty detailed SOPs on each little kind of part of the cultivation process. So like how to grow new mothers from cedar clone, how to maintain mothers, how to take cuttings, how to clone. Those are all like separate SOP documents, like page and a half. Step-by-step instructions to kind of designed so that they can, exactly like you're saying, hire somebody that doesn't have a lot of cultivation experience. And oftentimes when they do, then they have their own ideas about how things should be done and they don't follow the SOP, right? So if you have a good set of SOPs, I mean, that's what they're paying me now at this point to put together for them. So hopefully people will hire them, but that depends on management. And this is in a red state and far from here. So I can't, walk around and crack the whip and be like, you got to do this. We just have Zoom meetings and stuff.
Yeah, it's a model that I believe can work. Shanti Baba of Mr. Nice, he's been operating at, I think, out of Australia, but he's got grows in Oregon, pretty large scale, and I've seen him work through in past few years, and it's certainly possible. And I think when you do create a good set of SOPs, it really depends on who you're working with because communication is so like I almost feel like it's a little bit regional. Like some certain people, like we're saying the same words, but they mean different things to different people depending on where they're at, or like the tone that it's said with, or things like that. So eliminating as much of that as possible and just making it like really black and white, like plain, like it needs to be between here and there, like water this amount of times per day. And then when it works, they don't change it because usually the reason I think some people start questioning is like they feel like maybe it's not growing fast enough, or maybe something looks a little off. So then they're like, I need to do this thing that I heard about from maybe this grower who I hired who has been doing it his whole life and he's a third generation. And they said, oh, yeah, you've got to put you got to pee on it, man. If you piss on them, then of course they're going to grow way faster. And it's just like, wait, who's telling you to piss on your plants? And it's like that kid that we hired, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, oh, shit, like we got to rein this in, right? And that's obviously an extreme example, but it could be any number of additives or, side things or even just like differences
They
of.
definitely do things chasing numbers that hurt I mean, yeah, I mean that happens with a lot of different growers that I've worked with. And I try to talk them down from that. They all want to use PK boosters, for example. And I really don't recommend them much at all. With some clients, I end up sort of having to negotiate like how much they could use and really try to hold them down on these things. But usually they hire me and they want to sort of follow my advice. So, and most of the time I think they do. But that definitely happens.
It's always wild whether it's like your advice or Matthew's, because like I have a great deal of respect for both you guys, and usually when I ask you something, I am seeking advice, and because you're an expert in that field, and then when you tell me something, I'll follow through with what your, advice is. And it works out for me, 99.99% of the time. Like, and if there's any other issue, like I'd follow up with you and say, hey, this is what happened. And you'd say, oh, by the way, like there's this little caveat or something like that. And maybe what I not even I can't even think of an example where it didn't work. So I'll just say 100% of the time it's worked out. But sometimes people don't have that experience. So it's always fascinating to see what works and what doesn't. And I do think the communication element is difficult sometimes, but once you get it dialed in, you can crush it, kind of run after run, and get people to trust the system. And I saw something on Twitter, X, fuck, I keep calling it Twitter still. They call them tweets still, I think, or posts maybe, I don't know. But I gotta run this past you, Doc. What do you think about this person was running 5.0 EC?
I mean,
How's that playing? It looked a little off, and I almost wanted to jump in. I didn't have the time to respond to him and be like, I'd be running closer to like, 2.0 or like 1.7, But
uh,
yeah, I'm curious.
you start to wonder about other aspects of the grow. So, but I mean, you can train plants up, but that's pretty damn extreme.
That
It's
was one
definitely
of the
a
highest I've seen in a long
great
time. And
plant. Yeah. So you wonder what the VPD is under that. If he's running under a really sort of low VPD, that would help the plant survive under extremely high EC conditions. Yeah, I don't really know what to say. Does he alternate a flush? Does he like alternate plain water at some point?
I shouldn't have even brought it up because I didn't follow up and I don't have further
You can
information
get away
about
with
their.
that if you're going in at 3 or 5.0 or 5,000 microsiemens. You can get away with even that much if you're doing an intermittent flush. So if you're doing like feed, flush, feed, flush, feed, like a lot of people flush, just plain water, that alternate, then that basically mixes in the pot and it gives them the plants lower EC water that they can still access. But you're really not doing your plants any favors by trying to fertigate like that.
I had an interesting. I talked a little bit about I was at Hall of Flowers this past week, and this one guy was a tomato grower as well. And one of the techniques he was pushing, and he's not a cultivator anymore. I think he's like a product rep guy, but he was really strongly believing. He seemed like pretty scientific. Like I think he said he was background in chemistry or something like that. But I don't know. But he was talking about he gave good EC ranges actually, which I would have found good for cannabis or tomatoes or whatever. But then he said he dropped the EC a little bit on like a hot day, and then he would give them literal just salt, like sodium chloride, like, and he'd give them like a few hundred uh microsiemens, I think, or millisiemens, whatever it is. And I can't remember exactly what the reason was right now, but he really claimed that like introducing that into the system made the tomatoes infinitely stronger in flavor. Like the flavor production was like much, much higher and did side by sides. But I'm
Okay.
curious what you
I
think
mean,
about stuff like that.
it's definitely a stressor. It's going to jack up the local EC, make it hard for the plant to get water, and the plant doesn't really want the sodium. So, the sodium chloride. Um, so maybe with some varieties of tomatoes, and I certainly don't know this, but it sounds like what you're saying is maybe that stress creates a response in the fruit that maybe sweetens the fruit or something. But I certainly wouldn't try to borrow that wisdom over to cannabis.
Yeah, I don't think I am gonna implement that in cannabis anytime. I think it was more we're talking about like terroirs and how certain places like this group Bohemian Chemist my wife's been working with is like Amendo and their sun-grown living soil kind of they have situations where they have some really high terp expression, like 4% plus on a lot of their strains. And it's just you smell it when you open the jar. They're very, very potent aroma, despite like a lot of people kind of looking down on sun-grown or outdoor. This is like one of the brands I think that's doing an extremely good job of representing what can be done in the right location with the right strains. They're growing a lot of long flowering heirloom sativas. They have Lebanese black. They've got this one called Black African Magic, which I've talked about in the past. And yeah, like some of the highest THCV, the highest THCV I've ever seen, 8% THCV to 6% THC. So it's 14% overall with like 2 or 3% CBG in there as well, like getting up to around like 20% total and then like 4% terps. So kind of a wild mix, but really enjoyable smoke across the board. They have a bunch of different stuff, and
How was
that's
the
it. The high is motivational, uplifting, focused. I definitely got more appetite suppressant than I have on any other THCV because it's such a high amount. And they have a cart that was like 30-30. It's like 30% THCV and like 30% THC and like maybe 10% terpenes or something like that. And it tasted exactly like the flower. And despite me saying earlier, I'm not a huge fan of carts because they kind of give me that like tingle in the throat and sometimes I'll sneeze and cough and whatever. They're a little bit harsher than flower. That amount of THCV like going straight into the system is a thrill ride. It's like a really stimulating, heart exhilarating experience. Like I think some people don't like that experience, and I think that it might even be a little bit of a if you're going into like a medical procedure or something like that, it wouldn't be my suggested thing because you might get like tachycardia or something like that, where your heart literally starts to like thumping a little bit faster. And I don't know if that's 1,000% for everybody, but I do know like I think we've talked in the past with like Noah grow certain things like CBD impacts warfarin, and Spartan Grown mentioned when he got like stitches or something like that, they had him take less amounts or stop smoking because he was having like more bleeding and things like that. So cannabis certainly does impact our ability to heal and how certainly like our blood moves through our body and things like that, and a whole bunch of different systems. I mean, the endocannabinoid system impacts, I think, almost every single system. So it's amazing when you look at the little charts of where our endocannabinoids go. It's like literally from head to toe, all over. So it's amazing that I'm thankful like the Bohemian chemists and other groups are starting to focus on rare cannabinoids, minor cannabinoids. Like they're growing. Um, God, what the hell is the name of the strain? I'm the worst salesperson, obviously, but it's an old school. It's named after one of the hills here in California. I can't think of the name right now, but they have like higher CBG in some of these strains, and they were talking about like they like a lot of the minor cannabinoids, CBG, CBC, and THCV, and some of the stuff that's not as common. And I think that the more people get exposed to it, the more they'll realize like I compare it to the alcohol market because they're both kind of like flavored intoxicants, and you'll start to have like those sativas that are high terpinolene and THCV that people will gravitate towards for, like I was talking about earlier, popular in like the college markets in California and the coding markets and things like that. And then like Southern California is really big on OG gas, and right now candies and cookies and the cakes and Skittles and things like that. But it kind of ebbs and flows. All the old school stuff is coming back now. Like Blue Dreams, all of a sudden people aren't hating on Blue Dream anymore. It's like if you have Blue Dream, it sells fast. Super Silver Haze selling like crazy, and it's resurgent of all the old classics and the ones that I think earned their name and reputation. But with that said, uh, we've got some names and reputations here on this panel. I'll pass it over first to Noah the Grower to give his final thoughts and shout outs.
Yeah, I had a good time today. It was a lot of fun. Small show, but that's okay. I had a good time. Next week I'll go live in my room. I'm Noah the Grower with 2 E's. You can find me on Instagram. See everybody next week.
Thank you so much, Noah. Always great having you. And then next we'll have Matthew Gates.
Yeah, good talk, good talk. If you're interested to learn more about plant health and pest management, things like that, you can head over to my website, zenthanol.com, if you need help. And also check me out at Zenthanol, the YouTube channel, where I'll be posting some of those videos I talked about earlier. And also probably a little Zenthanol cut of my Living Soil Summit uh, presentation as well. So you can check that out as well.
Very cool stuff. I'm sure the people will be very excited to see that. And last and certainly not least of the panelists who joined us, I'm very happy that you showed up. Better late than never, as I always say. Great having you, Dr. MJ.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad I could be here. And thank you to Noah and Matthew for, keeping Jack company while I was getting here. So, and thank you, Jack, of course, for running the show every week. Everybody in chat, thanks for showing up. Come check out what we're doing at cocoforcannabis.com. Check out my YouTube channel, Dr. MJ Coco. And I do the Ask Dr. Coco show every Monday night for my Patreon subscribers. So check me out on Patreon. I'm Dr. MJ Coco, and yeah, I'll turn it back over to Jack Greenstock.
I'm happy to have the mic for a little bit because I do want to say on this holiday, I know a lot of cannabis users are also alcohol users, and a very important thing to remember is please do not drink and drive. It's never worth it, especially on holidays like today. A lot of other people on the road are going to be doing just that. Admittedly, I know that no one's going to stop that. So there's going to be accidents and there's going to be people that get hurt. So please don't add to that. Call somebody. There's a lot of free services, most like the Uber, Lyft, etc., or your local area might have that stuff for free. Rideshare, if not, it's always way cheaper than a DUI and way better than taking your own life or taking somebody else's life. So please think twice before you do anything irresponsible on a holiday. It should be a good time. Not to bring down the vibes at the end of a fun show, but it is really important to me that people do consider safety. I know we live in a free world, but please be responsible and enjoy your holiday, as we all should. Make sure you get home safe and so you can enjoy many more St. Patrick's Days and other holidays in the future. I'm Jack Greenstock. You can find all my stuff on 50strains.com. I'm going to get going and hang out with my wonderful neighborhood of amazing people. Thankful for all of them. Thankful for all of you on this panel, and thankful for everybody who listens live here on YouTube. And afterwards, I post this on X tomorrow morning, as well as all of the podcast platforms. So peace and love, everybody. Catch you all next week.
Grow love, everyone.
Keep growing.
And big cheers to the American one who was with us earlier, and to all the other panelists who couldn't make it this week.